Today, the theme is unlocking the power of healthy soils. There's a lot that goes into that, okay? So soil health, quite a few definitions out there. You can read that for yourself, but I think the important thing here is to understand the components of soil. Just take a quick look at that. Air and water make up how much of the composition of soil? Anybody want to answer? 50%. The mineral composition, which is mostly made of sand, silt, clay, and the nutrients make up 45%. And then 5% organic matter. Now, most farms don't have 5% organic matter anymore, but that is kind of the target to get to that, to have healthy soil. One motto that I've always lived by is healthy soil, healthy crops, healthy livestock, and healthy people. So what we start off with, and it's a cycle, right? So what we do to our soil goes to our livestock, they eat it, then that goes to us, we eat it, okay? And then it goes back into the soil. So, God made things to work in synergism. He made a cycle. So I think it's really important to understand that what you guys do, what we do with our soil, it has an effect on everybody in this world, actually, because we all have to eat. And it has to come from hardworking hands such as you guys.
Hey, Clint, grab your mic. We're moving around.
Yeah, I like those little things because I can't stand still. So, but soil health is soil wealth. So if we can get to healthy soil, it's going to fix a lot of our problems. So beginning with the basics, there's physical, chemical, and biological properties, okay? And we have to take all those and take a look at all those and pull them all together and find where all those things meet together. And I think, again, I want to reiterate and really set the foundation today that being rooted in Christ, we take the chemical, biological, physical, but I think going to the good Lord in prayer and understanding what he wants us to do is the most important. So I put together a soil health puzzle just to kind of illustrate, what are some of these things that we have to look at. You got soil type, you got the porosity, calcium magnesium ratios, you got all the biological life, you got the bricks, the pH, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And to be able to and that's probably like not even a small fraction of the things you actually have to consider. So it gets pretty complex. But one thing I wanted to point out to you is one of those pieces of the puzzles is missing. It's black. And why is that? Because we don't even know what we don't know, right? Like, we dig all the pieces of puzzle, and if everybody ever put a puzzle together, you take all that time, right? You get all these pieces, and they're all unique, and then you put them together, and then you get to the end of the puzzle, and your son or daughter or whatever was playing around, or your cat or dog, and you miss a piece or two of the puzzle, and it's like, man, I just spent hours putting this together, and I can't find that last piece. That's kind of what we live with on a day-to-day basis. And so we're constantly getting new pieces of that puzzle. And, you guys contributed to that. It's what do you learn? What do you experience? So what is most important? There's so many variables. Is it the organic matter? Is it oxygen? Is it pH? Is it carbon? Is it nitrogen? I don't know. And I think the way we have to look at it is there's no one answer that fits everybody's scenario. Our soil, it's different, even within the same field, right? It has personalities just like we do. It's alive. There's different composition, different problems. You can be going through a field and vary from 100 bushel to 300 bushel, all in the same field. And so being able to deal with that, I think is, it's a challenge that's going to be pretty consistent. However, I think what's really the most important thing is you got to be able to evaluate, well, what is my most limiting factor, okay? Because all of these things are important. And I put a set of dominoes there to kind of illustrate, how everything does have synergy with the next, right? We all have limited resources. We have limited time, limited equipment. You know, there's limitations. So to be able to put that most limiting factor and know what that is at the top is it's really critical. Because one farm, it might be carbon to nitrogen ratio. But most often what I see is I will say, you know, I've been very blessed to be able to walk many fields, many states, many soil types, all different kinds of farms, everything from guys, you know, the Amish farming with horses, which do a phenomenal job, by the way, to, you know, the latest and greatest, and you walk in and it looks like an equipment lot, and it's like, whoa, this is crazy, you know? But at the end of the day, we have to look at it as a holistic approach, okay? And knowing what that is as part of that set of dominoes, because the thing about domino is if you line them up and you knock one over, what happens? They just cascade down. And it will go as many dominoes as you set up. So I think it's really important to be able to identify that. So Liebig had a theory called law of minimum. Okay, I'm sure y'all have seen this before. And I didn't bring my cup, and I'm thirsty, so I wish I would have. But so he kind of lists some of the main things to take a look at, right? Like the soil conditions, the nutrients, all these things. And so when you look at like a barrel or a cup, okay, you have the potential to fill that cup, okay? And that changes. There's many factors in that. You know, what's your CECs, what's your all these things. So your potential is there, okay? And we know, what, 600 and some bushel corn, 620? Does that sound about right? Does anybody know? What's the world record on corn? 6 something, right? 623. Wow, okay? So the potential's there, right? But if you have a little pinhole, it could be as small a thing such as zinc or molybdenum. You need a 1 part per million. Or things that you never even heard of, like maybe, hopefully, like selenium or nickel, or the list goes on and on. But if you have that little pinhole, then you can't fill that cup all the way full no matter if you got everything else right or not, because it's going to keep coming out. Okay, it limits your potential. So finding a balance is also key. There is too much of a good thing. But walking all those farms I told you about, you know what the most common issue that I see is? And let me say this, in the first 3 years of working with somebody, does anybody want to take a guess? Tight soil. And what does tight soil restrict? Air, water. Okay, remember, gas exchange. And we're going to get into the science. There's people way smarter than me, you know, that are going to talk a little bit more in depth on that. But if you don't have air, remember, soil is alive just like we are. You know, if you have a full belly and you can't breathe, what does it matter? It doesn't matter. We got to have air. The breath of life was given to us on the first day from the soil. It needs to breathe just like us, you and I. It needs water. Okay, actually a plant is composed, a living plant, most of that is water, H2O. So managing air and water, so you're right, it is compaction, okay, especially in these clay soils, okay. Heavy clay soils have some great properties, but there's also some things that really need approached and addressed before you start spending money on what comprises 0.2% of your plant, or even less than that on a dry matter basis. So if we don't get the air and water or the basics right, I don't think anything else we do is going to actually work. And again, when we do that, I think there's several proven methods that have, and Scott's going to talk about gypsum. I think that's one part of it. That's the chemical side of it, right? Then we got the biological side of it. So what I've talked with some guys before is, I put a ton of gypsum on. I didn't see a thing. Okay, well, gypsum's not the silver bullet. Neither is biology. Neither is carbon. What else did you do? Well, nothing. Okay, well, you got to step back, take a look. Okay, we addressed the chemical side, but did we look at the biological side? Did we look at the physical side? You know, Jim's going to tell us about the Curse Buster, some revolutionary type equipment that I think can really transform your soil. But again, it's one piece of the puzzle. It takes all of us. It takes all of us to make this work. And we have to overlay that, right? Chemical, physical, biological. So don't forget that as the base. If we just go to Scott for gypsum, it's not going to fix our problem. It helps, because what does that do? Okay, I've taken quite a few samples here, and I'm going to talk about it later and kind of dig a little deeper in there. But what I see is, in this area, in my area, way different than where I grew up, way different when Melvin's up in the sandy areas, totally different. So the approach has to be different. The major limiting factor is different. But what I see on these soil samples is magnesium, usually in the 20% range on the base saturation. Calcium, wide range there. It could be anywhere from, I've seen 40-some% actually, up to almost 80%, okay? Potassium levels, 1-2%. Hydrogen. Does anybody know what pH means? I know you do, because we talked yesterday. Does anybody else know what pH means? Nobody? Potential hydrogen. When's the last time you bought hydrogen? Never. They don't know how to bottle it up and sell it to you, right? Very important, your potential hydrogen. But on that base saturation, you know what I'll see? Does anybody have a high pH over 6.9? What do you see on your base saturation hydrogen? I can tell you what you'll see. A big fat goose egg, a 0. You will never have hydrogen on your base saturation if you have a 7 pH or higher, generally even a 6.9. We overlook that, though, all too often, right? Why? Co-ops never talked about it. Fertilizer guys never talked about it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to sell it. Well, lime is actually, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're going out, because lime is calcium carbonate, okay? So, and we're going to dig in a little bit deeper into calcium, because that's a very important topic today in these soils. Calcium carbonate will raise the pH, okay? Your potential hydrogen, or your pH, is already high. So the potential is high, but the value is low. So it's actually an inverse relationship. So calcium carbonate is the exact wrong product that you should use, okay? And there's a few other things that go into that, and we're going to talk about that later. See, I get in these rabbit holes. You guys got to reel me back in sometimes. So basically, we need to stick to the three pillars, okay? Manage air and water. That's key. You know, don't spend too much money on anything else until you get that right, okay? Crop residues. That's your nutrient bank right there. Ken's going to talk to us about that. Critically important. That's money in your bank. That's your soil wealth. That's going to pay you dividends. It's like your retirement account, okay? You have a bank account, you know, that's your inputs, what your crop's taken out. But then you got your retirement account that's going to pay you dividends and compound over time. And that's what we're really after. And we're going to go over kind of some of the values of what's sitting in it. Let's say, I think on the slides it's a 180 bushel crop. Well, if you have a 180 bushel crop, we're not doing our job. We maybe on the first year or two, whatever, but down the future, the potential is way higher than that. So we need to figure out how to reach that potential, okay? And then manage crop fertility. So most often we have this in inverse. Well, why is that? Because that's how most of these companies make their money, right? The fertility, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, boron. And then if you work with other people, then they're probably pretty good to work with if they say, well, you need to add some zinc and get your phosphates 10-1 to your zinc, and boron and molybdenum and manganese and all these things. You're probably working with somebody pretty good if they take a look at all those things. So soil structure and tilth, to keep to those basic principles, we really need to start with tilth, okay? Tilth is created by biology. Structure is chemical and physical, i.e. wise tillage. So you see how tilth is comprised of those three components, right? So some of these things that we're starting off with, I just want to drive home to you to always fall back to some of them basic principles because they really set the foundation, okay? And there's a lot of variables. You can read it for yourself. We all know what tilth is. We all know where we want to be, but most of us are not there. But that's the goal, because what does tilth do? Creates pore space. It's going to fix the first basic principle, right? It's going to allow air, water infiltration, water holding capacity. Your soil colloids are going to be able to hold up to 10 times their weight. You're going to have organic matter, which is, man, that's a beautiful nutrient bank. That's a gift that keeps on giving. It's going to help fix all those basic principle problems. Just to drive this home, that's why it matters, right? Aeration and oxygen availability. Of what I've seen, that's the number one limiting factor thus far. Walking several farms in the area, testing several farms. And Dave, so me and Dave, God is so good. He brought Dave into my life and opened all these doors, and I've been able to have relationships with many of you guys here through Dave, but he's a wonderful brother in Christ, and we've spent a lot of time together, and bless his heart, we went and pulled some soil sample, and he said, I want to go with you, okay? Well, we get out there and take my probe, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a long day. Could not get the probe in. And Dave's looking at me like, gosh, that guy is weak or something. He's sweating. He's about out of breath trying to pull one plug. And it takes about 12 to 15 just to get a sample, And if you want to do it right, I try to pull a little bit more and mix them together, right? And you want to get about 6 inches down. And we'll go over that later too. So Dave, do you want to make a comment on what your experience was with pulling some soil samples? Yeah. So when I was out in the field, I actually got on my phone and I said, there's got to be a better way. This is too tight. It was too tight to even get 6 inches down. I am not joking. I had to. And I'm 220 something pounds. I just went to the VA. I think I was 223 pounds. Okay. I'm no little guy. And I got a heavy duty probe. I'm literally jumping on it. I'm actually doing circles like a pogo stick. No joke. Just trying to get one plug. And after one plug out, he's like, let me try this. And he's got on it. He's like, oh, this is crazy. I mean, just imagine a 220-pound fat kid jumping on something that's that big, and I can't even get in it. What do you think these plants feel like? Has anybody in here ever, in season, went and dug up your roots? Well, if not, I promise you, if I work with you, I will be there. I will be out walking that field. I'm going to dig it up. I'm going to smell the dirt. I'm going to look at the root ball. I'm going to take my penetrometer. I want to see what's going on. That's how you learn. That's how there's so many things that piece of paper on a soil sample doesn't tell you the whole story. The living and breathing entity, the plant, the roots, the soil, that tells you a whole nother side of the story that you'll never learn sitting in an office or in a tractor. So it's very important, very, very important. And in fact, that's where I've learned the most, is walking them fields, you know? So tilth matters. Here's the science behind it. I'm not going to dig deep into it. You know, you need flocculation, which is the chemical. That's calcium-magnesium ratio. You need dispersion, but ultimately we need aggregation. So it takes, again, biology, chemical, and physical approaches all come together to complete a process, right? So take a quick look at what good aggregation looks like. That's what we're going after. You want the roots to be able to go down. You want the water to be able to not only come down and push down by gravity with high pressure fronts or when rain comes, but Jim's going to enlighten us a little bit more on another process where we can actually feed our crops water from below. So flocculating cations, calcium. That's by far the best flocculator. And then, you know, the cake and the brownie theory, right? Same ingredients. Why is one fluffy and one tight? So I want to dig a little bit deeper into calcium options, okay? There's lime. We talked about that, calcium carbonate. The proper use of lime is if, one, you have a low pH, okay? That's kind of the first indicator. Two, you have low calcium values, okay? And then three, your calcium-magnesium ratios on your base saturation are off. But most importantly, pH is kind of the biggest driving factor there of when and when not to use lime as your calcium source. And I couldn't tell you how many times I've talked to farmers and they said, well, I've been liming the last 10 years. Yeah, I take care of my calcium. Yeah, you're right. But I don't think that's the right form of calcium. What's your pH? Oh, 6.9. You may want to consider maybe a better fit, okay? Because in chemistry, and I'm no chemist, but them chemical reactions behave way differently. So there's the right type of calcium to use at the right time, the right place, and the right amounts, the 4 R's, which we'll talk about later. In this area, what I've seen to be the best option for calcium options is gypsum. And you guys are very blessed right down the road at Rowan to have Scott there. And he's going to give us a little bit of information later. But what is just gypsum? It's calcium sulfate, okay? It's calcium and sulfur. On or about 19-20% calcium, you know, just like, and to just set a baseline here, all these tests you look at, they are variable. If you test manure, going to be variable. You test your soil sample at a different time of year, it's going to be variable. But about 20%, give or take, calcium, 17% or so gypsum. The general prescriptive rate here to start with, now given, that's just to start with because down the road may not be a good fit for you. But usually about 1,000 pounds per acre per year to begin with. Could you go higher? Yes, it depends on a lot of factors that we'll dig a little deeper in. There's also a product called C165 calcium. It's got, I believe, 4 types of calcium, 2 types of boron, 3 types of sulfur, and humics in it. So that's not actually from Rowan. It's from another distributor of that big, conglomeration of companies that we work with that has had pretty good proven results. In this area, I think it would be effective as far as it will work good, but generally I don't recommend that here because it's not cost effective. I think we can bridge that gap in a more economical way. Carbons, there's humics, compost, manure, and biochar. Biochar is one that I don't have a lot of knowledge on, and the good Lord's opened up doors in the recent that I've met a few brothers that really know their stuff on biochar, so I really look forward to learning more and digging in a little deeper there. As of now, I can't speak on it very much, but and I'm sure there's its time and place for use. But I know that these other things, the humic, the compost, the manure, they work. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And side note, if the government's paying a lot of money for something, and I say this from experience, you know, I spent about 19 years, almost 20, working with the government, the Department of Defense, and the military, mostly. Rethink it. Okay? If they tell you to look this way, consider looking that way. Okay? Liquid calcium sources. Oops. So there's TFRCA, that's kind of the baseline where we get started. That's part of the digester program that Ken's going to talk about. There's also organic options, micro-cal-O. There's Cal Plus, which has trace minerals in it. And then there's also liquid carbons, humics, fulvics. There's Boost Molasses. We work with Premium 21 humics, a company called BioGrow, excellent product. He actually came and spoke, I think, 2 years ago at our seminar. That stuff was way over my head when he got into the science of it. Dr. Meir? Man, very, very wise individual, though. International Humane Society or whatever, tested lots of products. So if you ever get a chance, you know, take a look at that video. I think we had it recorded and posted, but some of it's still over my head. Amino acid fertilizers. Does anybody have any experience working with amino acids? Very economical way. And so TPSL, Texas Plant and Soil Labs, you know, he's been studying this for how many years, Ken? Several. Over 50 years. And he has claimed that, was it 10 pounds of urea applied is equivalent, is it 1 pint? 1 pint of amino acid fertilizer, specifically nitrogen. That's what, a 40x? That's insane. Well, the chemistry behind it is basically the plant uptakes things in amino acid form. So we go put all this synthetic out. There's very little of it that's actually used to begin with, and then it takes energy for the plant to convert it to the source that the plant wants. This is already matches that, and it's formed from organic sources. And manure, man, that's good shit. Okay, it really is. But just like anything, all things in moderation. Okay, I think Dad even touched on that. That's one reason why we started getting out of balance. You know, we started putting that liquid gold out like it was, you know, no tomorrow. And generally, that's closest to your farm. Well, and that makes sense, right? Time, money, you got limited resources. You got too much of something, get rid of it. But man, figuring out how to bottle that and sell it to the guys that don't have access to it, a lot of need for it. Some best practices to build soil health. Actively growing crop. Mother Nature, God did not make Mother Nature to be bare. Okay? And we're going to touch on this and dig in the weeds a little bit about weeds. So if you go, or especially around here, or anywhere really, except in the desert, something wants to grow there, right? If you don't plant it, there's going to be a weed that's going to overtake it, right? You go to your garden, you don't weed your garden, you got a mess. Don't put limitations on God's perfect design. That plant, the one that just grows out of place, or the bad one, right? The bad weeds, it's actually telling you a story. That's God's way of naturally fixing whatever you're deficient in. For instance, dandelions out in your yard, directly related to soluble calcium. You add soluble calcium, no weed killer. Look what happens. And I can testify to that because I don't use any chemicals on my yards. And actually we got Jeremy who could probably talk circles around this, and he plays with, and I've been working with him for a while, and takes a really cool approach. He actually does a lot of organic lawn care and gardening for the Indianapolis area. Crazy smart, him and David, in many of those areas. And I'm learning from them as well. But that will get rid of that problem. Well, dandelions are there to pull that calcium up and to fix the problem. Okay? So it's telling, bottom line, plants grow, they are building your soil. Whether it's a weed or not, I'm not saying weeds are good, but it's telling you a story. And God makes them grow somewhere to not have Mother Nature be bare. It's for a reason. So we need to just be able to maybe consider that, right? Like, why does this happen? Why is this part of God's plan? You know, and try to emulate that. So, you know, cover crops is probably the most cost-efficient and effective way. However, limited resources. I understand it doesn't fit everybody's program. Okay, I'm just trying to share some considerations. Okay, you know, time of year. There's a lot of factors on why you can or cannot do cover crops. We didn't do a lot of cover cropping, but if you want to move that needle faster, that's something that you can integrate. But then now to dig into, I go into rabbit holes. Pull me back. The right cover crop, okay, matters as well. Okay, if it's just one species, same thing every year, all the time, take a consideration and evaluate is what problem am I trying to fix? Is it compaction? Yeah. You know, fine fibrous roots are probably going to be the answer there. But multiple studies still show it's not just one species is where you get your best bang for your buck. You know, multi-species, there's a synergism there, and it's like 1 + 1 = 3. So fertility does matter, don't get me wrong, but it's where we spend all of our budget, but probably need to consider that, you know, maybe step 3 after we get the other things right. Diversity of microbes. I love the product BioEnergy made by AgriEnergy Solutions. They used to have MVP and SB1, almost 40 years in development and improvements over the years, and they're going to share some of the test data and results I've been seeing from the field, and very consistent and great way to add diversity of microbes. But if you don't get the air and water right, it's not going to perform to its potential either. Residue management, again, and then well-fed crops. So this is just to kind of illustrate on a trial of what is it if we do nothing, the control. What is it if we just till, right? Because that's going to make my soil, you know, it's going to give it air to breathe, right? Temporarily, yes. And if you kind of look at the root ball, look at difference there. Yeah, it did make a difference. Then what happens if you fluff that up and then you fill that with biology? And I think it would have been really cool to see what happens if you add the chemistry side of it too. That, in this case, gypsum. So, chemistry, physical, biological. And I'm not going to get into the weeds here. Ken's going to share a lot with this, but why do we want to add biology? Lots of reasons. There are heavy lifters, right? Coming from the military, I think they're our soldiers. They're the guys on the ground. They're doing the work. So it's super important. It's critical. And as Dad pointed out, there's more in a spoonful of soil, more microbes and more life than people walking this earth. Blows your mind. So we need to treat it as such. And another thing, just wanted to, because water is a big problem, right? We're all waiting for that rain. When it rains 3 inches, and now we got too much rain. Understanding how water moves and why it moves the way it does is critical, and Jim's going to dig into that a little bit more. But with that, I appreciate your time, and I only saw a couple fall asleep, so it's not that bad. Yes, Jeremy.
To the point you were making a few minutes ago with cover crops, there's a YouTube channel called Growing Beer that might be helpful for people for that. He's a Christian guy that did a lot of stuff out in the Ozarks to using a specific method with cover crops dramatically increase the texture of the soil. And
definitely an ecosystem, and I've seen that, actually. I built my home about 5 years ago. Life was desolate, and I integrated biological practices on my own yard. You know, I have kids, animals, they run, play in the yard. I don't put chemical out there. And, you know, I've started seeing hummingbirds, just this year squirrels. It's an ecosystem. And it's pretty amazing. And when my wife and kids are like, oh, we're starting to see, we got butterflies now. We got praying mantises starting last year. So that year 3 really brought in a lot of life in the ecosystem. So there's definitely a lot to be learned there. And thank you for sharing that.